Good morning and welcome as we continue on the road to the cross. We pick up our scripture this week. We pick up where we left off last week in the Gospel of Luke, the 24th chapter, the 23rd chapter, the 24th verse. And I'll read that to get us started here this morning. We ended with the 24th verse last week. Pilate issued his decision to grant their request. He released the one they asked for, who had been thrown into prison because of a riot and murder, but he handed Jesus over to their will. As they led Jesus away, they grabbed Simon, a man from Cyrene, who was coming in from the countryside. They put the cross on his back and made him carry it behind Jesus. A huge crowd of people followed Jesus, including women who were mourning and wailing for him. Our focus this morning is on Simon, Simon from Cyrene. In the Gospel of Mark provides some details that Luke did not include. Luke was very straightforward in just saying that Simon was pulled out of the crowd and made to carry the cross. And when they say carry the cross, that is not the whole cross. It is the cross beam that the condemned was nailed to. The hands were stretched out and nailed to. That's the part that they were carrying. It's thought, and I think pretty well documented, that the upright was already at the execution site, and a hole was there, and there was the top of it was slotted, so that this crossbeam, once the prisoner had been nailed to it, could be slipped into that, and then the whole cross was erected up and slid into a hole that was already there. Golgotha, Golgotha. I put an I in there and it doesn't belong. Golgotha, literally, it means place of the skull. If you go online and type in Golgotha, you will see some images of a rock outcropping that looks eerily like a human skull. And this is the place that the Romans were executing. It was also, and this has more to do with the location, has more to do with it than the fact that it looked like a skull. It was right on the main passageway in and out of the city. People had to go by this site, and the Roman practice of crucifixion was that they wanted people to see it. They didn't do it in private. They wanted it out in the public. They wanted people to see all of the horror of it as a deterrent for the people. Shape up, or this could be you up there on the cross. The practice was to, after the condemned person had been sentenced, that they would take the longest route possible to get from where the prisoner was being held to the execution site. Here again, it was all about exposure. They wanted the people in the city to see the condemned people, to see that they had been whipped, severely whipped and beaten. And it was all about deterrent, of creating a situation that people would say, I don't want to do that, so I'll behave. It was during this walk through the city that Jesus, his stamina gave out, that he fell. Here again, that's Mark's detail. Luke doesn't give us that detail, that Jesus fell and couldn't get up. And the centurion, who was leading the prisoners along the way, just looked around the crowd, and Simon had to be standing there. He said, you, pick up that cross and carry it. Also says that he wasn't able to pick it up by himself, and that the Roman guards had to help lift it up into a position where he could drag it along and carry it the rest of the way.
Myself to be so helpful.
Yeah. Now, Mark adds also another detail that I think bears some consideration. He says that Simon was the father of Rufus and Alexandra. And I skipped over a part that I needed to say here, that Simon was from Cyrene. Cyrene was in northern Africa, what we know of today as modern day Libya. Because of this location, there are some people who have held that Simon was a black man. Um, More than likely, that's not true. More than likely, Simon was a Jewish man who, for whatever reason, had been relocated or found himself living in Cyrene. Under the Jewish law, to be in good standing with the Jewish religion, every male, every so many years, had to journey to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover in Jerusalem. Um, and so it's more likely that Simon had traveled to Jerusalem with his sons to fulfill that obligation. And it was also something that people look forward to. This was a highlight of your life to be able to go and to celebrate the feast, one of the feasts, in Jerusalem, under the leadership of the high priest in the temple, to be able to celebrate that in the temple. So that's more than likely why Simon was there with his sons, Rufus and Alexandra. It's also noteworthy that for an author in this time to identify the sons of the father, it's not just to identify who he was. It means that the sons had some significance, that the readers who were hearing this story, that there was something significant that would, that some reason why they would be called out, that people would know who they were. One of the traditions that has sprung up around this is that Rufus became part of Paul's entourage, who traveled along with him, and that he had become a very influential person. I want to come back to these two sons later on here at the end, but just that they're being identified means that there's some import to them, and that Christians would have recognized who they were because of that. What kind of impact do you think that this event would have had on Simon, on Rufus, on Alexandra? We don't know how old the boys were when this event took place. And while you're thinking about that, Bob Burkhart, in his book On the Road to the Cross, he sets the scene for his meditations on this event by having Simon revisit the site several days later, sometime after the resurrection. And he focuses his thoughts there on Simon finding a nail that's laying there in the dirt. And he describes it as a nail that's red in color, first giving you the indication that it had been there for a long time and it was covered in rust. But then as he goes on, he makes it clear that the red is the blood from one of the nails that was used in the execution. Doesn't say whether or not it would have been one of the ones used with Jesus or not. It's just a nail that was laying there. It's from other reading that I've done, it's also been speculated that the nails that were used for nailing a prisoner to the cross would have been used over and over again. Nails were a rare commodity. They weren't. You couldn't go down to the hardware store and say, "Give me a pound of these." Nails were formed by a blacksmith, and they were expensive. So there would have been a reason for them to save them and use them over and over again, especially a big nail like the ones that they would have needed. It would have been a spike more than a nail. something about this long enough to go through, um, as grisly it is to describe it, the human flesh, and also firmly attached to the wood to hold the person in position there.
Well, even early American pioneers, when they left the place, a lot of times they burnt down their buildings so they could get some nails back out
Yeah,
and take them with them because they were so hard to come by. Blacksmith just didn't go ahead and make a bunch of nails. He had other stuff to do.
when I was growing up, my stepfather acquired a building. He did home construction primarily on roofing and sheet metal work, doing guttering. And one of the houses that he worked on, they had this outbuilding that they wanted to get rid of, and he literally cut it apart. And I guess I don't remember if there was a trailer, although the pieces that ended up at home would have had to come either on a flatbed truck or a trailer. And one of the chores that I had as a early teenager was to go out there and take the nails out of these boards
And straighten them.
and
I
straighten
did the same
them so
thing.
that they could be used again.
I had a chalk block and you take a hatchet and you start tapping them and get them straight.
Now I remember doing that, but for the life of me, I can't tell you what the rubber was used for, or what we ended up using it for. We didn't build another building with it. I do remember that. I think it might have been used as a roof on a chicken house that he built out of cinder blocks. Not a small chicken house. It was about something about 10 by 20 that he built out in the back of our. And I remember that there was a roof on it, and probably those boards probably ended up there on that and used to help construct that. But what about Simon? What about Rufus?
Well, it doesn't say how long he's been in Jerusalem, and if they come from their where they were living, they'd be like, strangers. They wouldn't know all the streets' names and everything. Unless they had family members that would show them and tell them, "Hey, Jerusalem has grown since you left this area. This is how it is now." Just like people come back to Bedford years later, they're amazed as to, man, what's sprung up around here, and how they added more roads and bypass and stuff like that. So you really don't know how long he's been in there, whether it's been just a few days or 2 or 3 weeks, and be picked out and have to carry a heavy beam on his shoulders. Because I know as a kid, I used to carry stuff on my shoulders. It was a lot easier if somebody helped pick it up and get it on my shoulders. Once I got it on my shoulders,
Once you got
you
it
can
up,
balance it and walk. But to carry it and try to get it up there, it's why weightlifting. You better have a spotter with you if you try to pick up something heavy, or you can get hurt.
Well, if he had grown sons, and they must have been grown if they had a name, if they had made a name for themselves.
well, you have to understand that when they were recording the Gospels and would have included their names, that would have meant that something had happened afterwards. So they could have been very young at this point.
Okay, never mind.
Go ahead.
I think the first thought I have about being Simon would be scared, being picked out of a crowd by a Roman soldier and having to follow condemned people and get caught up in all that.
You see their handiwork and the beatings that the three men exhibit there. Yeah.
And seeing that, you're gonna be afraid if you don't do what they say, that's gonna happen to me. I don't follow orders and do what they tell me to do.
Well, if one of them was in Paul's entourage when he grew up. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, he was a kid and it must have had some effect on him spiritually.
I would think so. Now, there's another thing that happened here as a result of being pulled out of the crowd. They ended up having a front row seat at the execution. They were no longer pressed back in the crowd because of Simon having to carry the cross. He was right there front and center for the events that took place there.
Have you ever carried a beam like that?
I have carried some heavy pieces of lumber like that, yeah. When we added a deck on, the side of our house, and I used 2x12s. They were 12 feet long, and, that was a struggle maneuvering them by myself there.
When we did Epiphany Ministry, we did carry a beam,
Mhm.
and 6 of us carried the beam, and he would have people, 6 of us together, and on the wall, one person would drop off, and someone else would. 6 people carried it, it was heavy. I cannot imagine 1 or 2 or 3. And these were teenage boys, were pretty strong.
Yeah, think in terms of a railroad tie.
Heavier than that.
And a 12x12, so 10x10s.
Well, to help formulate your thinking as we bring this to a close, I think it was about 20 years ago, it was sometime back, Ray Boltz, at when he just came on the scene as a contemporary Christian singer and songwriter, he wrote and recorded a song that's called "Watch the Lamb." And the song is about the events that we've been talking about here, about Simon and Rufus and Alexander. So listen to the way that Ray Boltz puts this story together. Walking on the road to Jerusalem, the time had come to sacrifice again. My 2 small sons, they walked beside me on the road. The reason that they came was to watch the lamb. Daddy, Daddy, what will we see there? There's so much that we don't understand. So I told them of Moses and Father Abraham. Then I said, dear children, watch the lamb. There will be so many in Jerusalem today, we must be sure the lamb doesn't run away. And I told them of Moses and Father Abraham. And then I said, dear children, watch the lamb. When we reached the city, I knew something must be wrong. There were no joyful worshipers, no joyful worship songs. I stood there with my children in the midst of angry men. Then I heard the crowd cry out, crucify him. We tried to leave the city, but we could not get away, forced to play in this drama, a part I did not wish to play. Why upon this day were men condemned to die? Why were we standing here, where soon they would pass by? I looked and said, even now they come. The first one cried for mercy. The people gave him none. The second one was violent. He was arrogant and loud. I can still hear his angry voice screaming at the crowd. And someone said, there's Jesus. I scarce could believe my eyes, a man so badly beaten, he barely looked alive. His blood poured from his body, from the thorns upon his brow, running down the cross, falling to the ground. I watched him as he struggled, watched him as he fell. The cross came down upon his back. The crowd began to yell. In that moment, I felt such agony. In that moment, I felt such loss. Till a Roman soldier grabbed my arm and screamed, you, carry his cross. At first, I tried to resist him, and then his hand reached for his sword. So I knelt and took the cross from the Lord. I placed it on my shoulder and started down the street. The blood that he'd been shedding was running down my cheek. They led us to Golgotha. They drove nails deep in his feet and hands. Yet upon the cross I heard him pray, Father, forgive them. Oh, never have I seen such love in any other eyes. Into thy hands I commit my spirit, he prayed, and then he died. I stood for what seemed like years. I lost all sense of time until I felt 2 tiny hands holding tight to mine. My children stood there weeping. I heard the oldest say, Father, please forgive us. The lamb ran away. Daddy, Daddy, what have we seen here? There's so much we don't understand. So I took them in my arms, and we turned and faced the cross. Then I said, "Dear children, watch the Lamb." This is a very, very powerful song. And if you've never heard it, I would invite you to just go online and type in Ray Bolt's "Watch the Lamb." And you'll find some YouTube videos of him performing the song. And there's also a video that dramatizes the events as he sings the song there. But as we continue on this journey to the cross, there's a lot of power in that song that points the way and draws us into that drama. That we become there at the foot of the cross and we watch and we see and we experience. And we too end up, as Ray sings that last line, "Behold the Lamb." We're almost there at the cross. Today is Palm Sunday, and we've moved through the Holy Week this week and then into the Easter celebration of the resurrection. So I thank you for being with me this morning, and we look forward to how Pastor Don will open this up later on in worship today. Thanks again for joining me at the table.